Hi, I'm Dr. Frank Banfill. If you're a fan of NFL football like my wife and I are, then you're just thrilled, especially after seeing those games, the championship games that would determine the two teams that would play each other in the upcoming Super Bowl. And exciting, but there's been a lot of buzz, not just about those teams, but there's been a lot of buzz the last several days about the call of those games, especially the call of Tony Romo, sophomore broadcaster. And I tell you what, I have seen more things written about him in the last couple of weeks than I have probably about the teams that are going to play in the Super Bowl. I mean, everything is just lit up. Twitter was lit up, all these articles, coast to coast, newspapers, online, ESPN, everybody's talking about the job that Tony Romo did calling the game, the Patriots and the Kansas City Chiefs. So as I've read all of these different things, it began to dawn on me that there are some incredible leadership principles that you can see in Tony Romo's life and what we're witnessing happen each week in the CBS broadcast booth. Now, I got to tell you, I'm a big Romo fan, but not as big as my wife. My wife, it was up to her. Tony would still be quarterbacking the Dallas Cowboys today, or he would be quarterbacking somewhere because she just believes in him so much. So we're great fans of Tony and the Cowboys. But I'm going to give you 3 leadership principles that I see at work in Romo's life that's exemplified now that he's made the switch from being quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys to sitting in the CBS broadcasting booth. Romo has an innate ability to predict what's going to happen on the field before it actually happens. He's able to read how the offense is structured, read where the defense is at. And at one point in the overtime game between Kansas City and New England, Romo actually marked out on the screen where the offensive receiver was going to move to, where the ball was going to move to if the defense did a certain thing. And sure enough, just like it was scripted, we watched that play unfold exactly as Romo had spelled it out on the screen. And so people have a lot of fun with that. Even people in other sports are saying, hey, Romo, where am I going to play next year? I'm a free agent. You seem to know everything. So let me give you three leadership principles from all this. Number 1, Tony Romo was preparing for this job when he didn't know he was preparing for this job. What I mean by that, well, when you go back and you look and you read what everyone's saying about Tony, even himself, what he's saying about himself, you can see that the preparation that he did as a quarterback in the NFL, the preparation that he did even before going in the NFL, set him up for success in what he's doing today. In other words, when he was in those film rooms all by himself at Cowboys headquarters, studying the defense, studying his offense, looking at the film of what he had done right, what he had done wrong, all of those things, he was preparing for this job today, and he didn't even realize he was preparing for it. Why? Because he was preparing for what was in front of him at the moment. And here's the thing. As a leader, you are preparing today for what's going to come down the road in the future. You have no idea what that's going to be. But how you approach today says everything about how you're going to approach tomorrow. Great leaders always know that they are constantly preparing for tomorrow by doing a great job today. We can't just say, well, I don't really like what I'm doing. Oh, this isn't that important. Whatever it is, whether it's volunteering, whether it's something you get paid for, whatever it might be, give it your all because you are preparing today for that next thing, that next career, that next opportunity that's coming down the road, and you don't know anything about it. Number 2, Romo didn't let his pride keep him from moving on. If you know the story, he had been injured. Dak Prescott came in, started doing incredibly well. Tony recovered from his injuries, was ready to play and could have played. But because Prescott was doing so well, it became obvious that he was going to be the future of the Dallas Cowboys and not Tony Romo. And I don't think I'll ever forget hearing the press conference that Romo did when he said these words, "This is Dak's team." I can't imagine how hard it was for Romo, who had been led the Cowboys for all of these years, who had been the leader and was in that locker room, and everybody looked up to him, and he had such a great rapport with everybody. I can't imagine how hard it was for him to say those words. It's not my team anymore. In other words, he was saying, I've got to move on. And then, as we know, he moved on into the broadcast booth. Here's the thing. Some leaders don't know when it's time to move on. Or worse yet, some leaders won't, because of their pride, won't move on. They won't move on from their ideas. They won't move on from past successes. They won't move on from processes that maybe used to work but don't work anymore. They won't move on because of their pride. They feel like, hey, if I move on from this, it's a reflection on me, it's tearing down me, and it's pride that's holding them back and maybe holding their organization back from the success that it could have if they would just be willing to move on to that next thing, or accept that next idea, or realize that what we did in the past worked then, but it's not working now. It's time to move on. And number 3 thing that we learned from Tony Romo is that leaders are learners. Leaders are learners. Tony wasn't describing and divulging his secrets in preparation, but we know that he is a learner. We know that he studies today just like he studied as a quarterback, just like as he was preparing for everything. He is learning everything he can about not just what's happening in the industry, in his case professional football, but what's happening within each of these teams, what's happening within these each person playing, each of the players. He is trying to learn. Leaders are learners. This last week I had the privilege of sitting down with this older gentleman who describes himself as a futurist. A futurist is somebody who looks at the past, analyzes the present to try to get ahead of where society might be going in the future. And he told to me, Frank, he said the number 1 attribute of leadership in this century, going forward in this century, is learner, is being a learner. He said because society and technology and everything else is moving so fast, it's disrupting everything that's happening around us. And when things are disrupted, when nothing is, when you can't predict what's going to happen, you have to be able to learn so that you can adapt to what happens in the moment. And we saw that in Tony as a quarterback. We saw that in Tony now as a broadcaster, able to learn and apply that learning to the moment to be able to make the right prediction, to be able to make the right move. And as a leader, we have to be lifetime learners. Whatever you did in the past, this is what this futurist told me. He said, Frank, organizations today really aren't that concerned with what you did in the past. They're concerned about how you can lead them into the future. And the ability to lead them into the future is to be able to read things, be able to read people, and see what's coming. Be able to read the defense, see what may be coming at you, and be able to lead that organization accordingly. Hey, I think these are some great lessons. Tony Romo seems to be a great guy. I've never met him, although I'd love to. My wife, Tony, if you're watching, my wife would love to meet you. We've been married 28 years. That would ensure the next 28 years for me if she can just say hey to you. Hey, but some great lessons. Number 1, you are preparing today. You're preparing for this job when you didn't even know you were preparing for it. Number 2, you can't let pride keep you from moving on. And then number 3, leaders are learners. Great lessons from Tony Romo that we can apply to our lives as leaders today. I'm Dr. Frank Banfill. Have an awesome day.